So just so I can grab the hometown advantage, I want to let you all know that I'm a native Princetonian, class of 1989 Little Tigers, it's Princeton High School. So it actually is very exciting for me to be here in Princeton and to be able to discuss these issues. I think they're such important ones to be discussed, and I'm very grateful to Princeton to have brought us all here. In all honesty, I'm actually a little confused about why BDS is considered so controversial and why in some quarters it's not considered a legitimate strategy. And I just want to briefly respond to Mr. Mays before I go into my remarks. First of all, Israel is the only country, with the exception of Morocco, which has been occupying the Western Sahara, that has an occupation, has a UN-recognized occupation, and it's the longest of any country. Beyond that, Palestinian civil society has come together to call for BDS as a nonviolent way to respond to that occupation and to other things such as the inequality of Palestinian Israelis and the rights of Palestinians to have return. So that is the reason why one of the reasons why Israel is being targeted in that way. Israel certainly is not the worst human rights defender in the world, but all of us as Americans, it's our worst human rights defender in the world, in the sense that Israel is the largest recipient of military aid of any country in the world, and for those of us who are Jewish, and as it turns out all four of us here are who are doing this debate, Israel claims us. It claims to be a state of all of its people, not just to be a state of its citizens, which actually says a lot for how it treats the 20% of its residents who are not actually Jewish and the level of equality that Palestinian and Israeli citizens have. And I would really encourage this House to invite some Palestinians to also debate this issue and to be able to speak for themselves in terms of why they are pursuing this path. BDS is a nonviolent, time-honored, and time-tested set of strategies and tactics. It's not a tired tactic, it's a successful tactic. It's been used by Gandhi in India, been used by Mandela in South Africa, by Martin Luther King in the United States, to help end the slave trade in England. So many of the other justified and now really celebrated struggles around the world, this has been a successful set of strategies and tactics. So they've been proven that they can work. And it's one of the most potent tools that all of us who make up civil society can use to make change. And that's important because the problems in Israel and Palestine, the case of Israel and Palestine, other methods have failed. I think we can all admit that there's no military solution. It is too small a physical area. The lives of Palestinian and Israeli people are too entwined that there's no military solution. As we've seen pretty definitively in the last few weeks, there's really no diplomatic solution either. The U.S. is the main enabler of Israel through its military, economic, and diplomatic aid, and it has been completely unwilling to hold Israel accountable for its actions, even to our own U.S. policy goals. And it continues to use only carrots and not sticks with Israel. And so, we saw President Obama in the last few weeks making a really unseemly attempt to bribe Israel with weapons and money and UN support, instead of demanding that Israel adhere to U.S. policy and international law. And as you saw, Israel actually rejected that offer. I think the peace process, which has been going on for 19 years now, is really been a disguised way for Israel to grab land. The peace talks are dead in the water right now, but they've actually perpetuated the occupation. More and more settlements are being built, and human rights are being violated every day as the peace talks continue. And this has been a policy regardless of party in Israel. And I also have a quote from Yitzhak Rabin, who's known as a peacemaker, and he said, "For all its faults, labor has done more and remains capable of doing more in the future in expanding Jewish settlement than Likud with all of its doing. We have never talked about Jerusalem. We have just made it a fait accompli. It was we who built the suburbs, as they call it, in the annexed part of Jerusalem. The Americans didn't say a word because we built those suburbs cleverly." So that's what Israel's been doing and pursuing as a known strategy while we've been in this peace process. In the meantime, the U.S., which calls itself an honest broker, has really been anything but. Just the last few weeks, there was a letter that was signed by 87 senators at the instigation of AIPAC to say that it's on the Palestinians to continue negotiations with Israel despite the fact that this partial, temporary, somewhat enforced settlement freeze was happening. So we really have to acknowledge that in terms of the diplomatic and political process, that we do not have the power to make change right now. And the way to influence that process. And that to pretend to do so is to do a disservice to everyone. In Israel, where I lived for 3 years, more and more activists who have been fighting on the ground for Palestinian rights have turned to BDS as a strategy that works. BDS is a strategy of hope. It's a strategy of a belief that if there's a future that can be built that ensures the security and freedom of all people, Israeli and Palestinian, and that all people have equal rights and rights to those basic dignities. So everything else has been tried and nothing has worked, and as the situation's been getting worse and worse on the ground, why not BDS? It's nonviolent. It allows individuals to express their values all over the world, and it can really be a pressure point for change when governments have proved themselves unwilling to move. So at JVP, my organization, those are the factors we looked at. We look at the worsening human and civil rights situation on the ground in the Palestinian territories and also inside of Israel. The decades-long peace talks, which have entrenched the Israelis even more in the occupied territories, and the US government unwillingness to intervene in any real way to create a true equal field for negotiations. The only thing that can change that is to build a movement that can change those power dynamics, and BDS is that movement. It's a tool for increased communication and public education, and that it can help build a future for Israelis and Palestinians. It's based upon a belief that something better can be there for all residents of the region, not based on separation and discrimination, but on equal rights for all. And it allows us, as I said, as Jews, those of us who are Jewish and who are doing this work, to act upon our Jewish values. I really see this work as part of the values of justice and freedom that I was brought up with and that I hold most dear. I want to just mention that JVP's particular position on BDS is limited to the occupied territories. Max does not represent the BDS movement. I do not represent the BDS movement. The Palestinian civil society that has created the BDS movement represents the Palestinian movement. But that's really the beauty of it. It's a very decentralized movement that works in its local context, and it's an opportunity for all of us in our own way, in our own communities, to take action meaningfully to fight for rights for everybody. So JVP, for example, is working hard to get TIPREF, which is the pension fund of choice for Princeton University, as well as many other institutions around the country, to divest from companies that are profiting from the occupation. I want to address some of the most common arguments against BDS. The first, that it will alienate Israelis, that Mr. May the first came in, that will reinforce the us versus them mentality. Again, there's a lot of Israeli activists who are actively supporting BDS, and it's not that BDS is hurting Israelis. It's really the anti-democratic actions of the Israeli government. There are progressive groups like Shobrim Shtika, Breaking the Silence, which are ex-soldiers who are simply testifying about what they saw and what they did in the West Bank and Gaza. They do not take a position on BDS, but they are being attacked by the government. I was in Israel during the attack on Gaza. I was living in Tel Aviv. People were completely indifferent in Tel Aviv to what was happening in Gaza. There's an incredible acceptance in Israel for a reliance on military and destruction that's morally unacceptable, is destroying Palestinian lives, and it's unhealthy for Israelis as well. Finally, I want to talk about the argument that it delegitimizes Israel and singles Israel out. Again, Israel singled itself out by being the biggest recipient of aid to the US. And we've been singled out as Jews who are implicated in the Jewish project. As our young JVP activists in New Orleans showed recently, Israel is delegitimizing itself by its behavior, and BDS is designed to change that behavior. So rabbis refusing to rent to non-Jews delegitimizes Israel. The settlements delegitimize Israel. The siege on Gaza delegitimizes Israel. The loyalty oath delegitimizes Israel. As Peter Beinart said recently, no amount of money and no amount of condemnation is going to stop the BDS movement unless Israel changes its behavior. The whole idea behind BDS is that Israel be held accountable to international law, no more and no less than any other country. And Israel's been asked and has been given a pass from this international structure for too long, and that's what we're trying to equalize. So from our perspective, BDS is the best potential to build a movement that has the power to create a truly just peace, one that provides equality, human rights, security, and freedom for all the people in Israel and Palestine, Jewish and Palestinian.